Hello, everybody. This is Flamingo right here speaking to you all. Nah, just kidding. I'm not gonna do that voice for you guys. And yeah, you know what time it is. It's Halloween season. You get to go trick or treating with your kids to go get some candy. You get to watch horror movies. You get to wear costumes and plenty of other stuff around this time of year. And for me personally, watching disturbing moments in cartoons. I don't know about you guys, but when I was a teenager, I fell in love with these when I was 15 years old, and I still love them even to this day, though. I was inspired by The Hero of Tomorrow and The Mysterious Mr. Enter when they did these kind of videos, though. In fact, not only that's how I got my starting in wanting to do videos, but that's also where I started my intro with those two in general, though. Yeah, believe it or not, those two were my intro about how I wanted to do videos for myself on my channel. But since I'm doing childhood nightmares for you guys, I must give you all a few rules. Number one, I'm only gonna put one Halloween special on this list, mostly because not a lot of them scared me, but they still fascinated me a lot of ways. And what's more, I don't want this list to be convoluted as all hell, though. Number two, all these other episodes are pretty subjective, though, so if you like or dislike these episodes, I'm not taking that away from you, but what I'm gonna say to you guys about how they scared me and so much and so forth. Number three, since I can't really show more than one picture, I'm gonna have to do like the show's A list, but hopefully it's not 2 hours long like that video turned out to be, though. What's more, my storage can't handle something like that. And number four, because this is a list of my scary nightmares, though, I'm just gonna go ahead and just do six or eight entries on this list, so that way it won't be too convoluted and complicated as time goes on, though. So, without further ado, let's get started. This is Flamingo Writer. Hi, here's a childhood and nightmares. Let's go! So starting off this list, we might as well talk about the one and only Halloween special to get out this list anyways. Now, like I said in the beginning, this list is pretty subjective, so if there's a list, if this list has something that you like or dislike, I'm not going to take that away from you, though. However, starting off this list, we're starting off with something that's related to the Grinch. Now I know what you're thinking. I thought the Grinch was only for Christmas. How could that scare you? Well, you'd be mistaken if I didn't tell you that there was a Halloween special out there known as Halloween is Grinch Night. And does it live to that title? Well, sort of, but still. Now, this is one of those specials that, while I admit it only aired once on television on TV, I'll get into why they did so already, though. So what is Halloween is Grinch Night? Well, the special goes like this. It's Halloween in Whoville, and everybody in said town is pretty much really scared around this Halloween, because it's a night where the Grinch takes action in his own full time, where he gets to do something scary on Halloween, along with everyone being scared around that time, though. First, here's his story, though. We get to see what the Grinch is like on Halloween, and we get to see a little boy this time. Yes, we see a little boy instead of Cindy Lou, who wants to find out what the Grinch's big deal is, and why does he love Halloween so much, though. Now, on paper, this sounds like a great idea. I actually wouldn't mind seeing this being a special to watch every time, though. And to be honest, though, there's a lot of things you could do about the Grinch. Say what you want about the Grinch being only a Christmas figure, but I think a Halloween one could do him no wrong in here. It's amazing that you can do something like this. And honestly, when I watched this as a kid, while it did frighten me, though, I think it could actually frighten me in ways that I couldn't understand until I got a little older, though. And in this case, my opinion on this special has changed a bit. But let's go over why the special seems to be a special that not a lot of people have remembered since then, though. For starters, the special itself, having a Halloween special, sounds like it would be a good tradition to have. But when I say my opinion has changed around it since then, this is what I mean. Around the time when I watched this when I was younger, when I was still discovering YouTube, I remember watching this special as a kid while I started watching this. And I liked it at the time. But now that I'm older, well, it's not the worst special out there, but it's not really anything spectacular either. If you want my honest opinion about this special, it's fucking boring. The whole thing about Halloween is Grinch Night really starts questioning what can they do with this special, but I'm not gonna lie, there's only a few positive things and few negative things I can say about that. So let's go over the negative stuff though. For what it's worth though, this special's pacing is absolutely horrendous. Pun not intended or intended, but that's you get what I mean though. What I'm saying is that the special itself doesn't take full advantage of it until near the climax of this entire special. And I'm not joking, the special itself doesn't do anything with it except for hear about the climax, and as a writing standpoint, that's pretty lazy. When you're a writer like me and you have to write a story for an audience just to get engaged about what's going to happen, though, it's best to keep them intrigued so they can take full advantage of it. Take every advantage you can with it. But when you have little advantage to do with it and you have to wait till the climax of it, it's really gone to the point where I personally think people are just going to give up after that. And you don't want your audience to give up on something that you worked on, though. And for another thing, while I admit this isn't really based on a book, and before you say anything, I actually researched to see if this was based on a book, and truth be told, this was not based on a book. This was just an original TV special made just on the off-canon event. Now, I have no thing against something that when it comes to having Halloween and Grinch Night being an off-canon event, but despite being a prequel, you think that they would do more with it. And the downside of this, though, the Grinch in this special just acts like an entire asshole. Here's what I mean by that. Say what you want about the Grinch being a jerk and everything, though, in the Christmas specials, but at least he had reasons to do, and you see him take full advantage of that idea, though. Here, though, he's just a straight-up asshole to the point where he's too intimidating for anyone to get a hold of him, though. Not even some of the kids want to know about him, though, except for that little boy I mentioned, though. Oh, and by the way, if you're gonna think that Cindy Lou is in this special, you're gonna be kind of disappointed, though, because she doesn't appear this special. Not only that, though, she doesn't have a little bit of a cameo, though. Now, I get that this is a prequel and everything, but come on, you're not gonna even give a little bit of credit for her, though, even if it's just for a tiny bit. Maybe they did have her in here, but I just didn't notice it, though. And the worst thing is, though, it felt like the creators were trying a little too hard to make this special work as much as it is, though. If memory serves correctly, though, I remember being so scared of this special after watching it, and it fascinated me to the point where I wanted to watch it again every time, though. But after that, I started asking myself, why didn't I care for it as much as I thought I would have, though. And believe it or not, there's not much I can say about it from the story, though. Hell, even the songs themselves aren't all that memorable in my opinion. Like, the songs I can think of at the top of my head are probably Max's Lipman song, which I'm not so sure if it's just me, but when I heard Max's point of view song come up, though, it sounds like Gene Wilder, but truth be told, every time where I look, I can't to figure out who sang it, nor can I find out who credited the singer, because it does sound like Gene Wilder, even if that wasn't him, though. And the other song, and I'm pretty sure anyone who's seen the special already know the song, it's got to be the song where the Grinch finally takes his full action into play, though. Now, there are some positive things I will say about this special. Despite this special not being too memorable for my taking, I will say, though, the visuals themselves are pretty great. They're not anywhere near as high level as, say, Chuck Jones's art style, but hey, I actually do like the art style. It does reflect on Dr. Seuss's adaptation of the books, and what's more, they did a lot what they had, though. And if anything, though, it seemed like the songs themselves, despite the only two songs I can think of, they're at least passable. Not anything spectacular, but something they would listen to if one is depressing and one's a little frightening, though. So you might be asking yourself, though, why don't people remember this special as much as they used to? I can only comment into a few things. First, one thing, this here special felt like they were trying a little too much with themselves. Like, you might be asking yourself, why didn't this air on TV anymore, aside from that? Well, aside from not airing on TV, despite that notion, they did seem like they had a lot of things going for it, though. Especially because he pretty much wanted to make this Halloween special marketable for kids, but get this, not only was it too scary for younger viewers, but for adults as well. So, yeah, that's really an accomplishing, though. Personally, I wouldn't recommend watching this special with your kids if they're not into something so frightening. And another thing, too, is that this special, despite it being a half an hour long, though, you can pretty much watch this on YouTube and lose nothing. You wouldn't even have to spend a single penny worth it if you don't want to watch anything this haunting for yourself, though. That being said, though, I kind of feel bad because even the songs themselves could have been better since this was written by one of the writers from Sesame Street. I'm not kidding. And before you say anything, I feel pretty bad that not only did this special not have the original voice for someone like Thurl Ravencroft and Burles off, or how you say his name. Yeah, I'm not good at pronouncing names here if it wasn't obvious. But yeah, I feel like this special in of itself, though, doesn't really seem like they put more forward blow into it, though. So there's no really much I can say about it. It's a shame because if this were to air on TV and if it was a classic by default, I can definitely see people watching this up there with Is the Great Pumpkin Charlie Brown as being a Halloween special. But no, apparently they don't do much of anything with it. So, Grinch, I may love you and everything, but still. Oh, and speaking of the Grinch, I should mention that maybe you shouldn't really watch this anyways, because the Grinch here whips Max just to get his cart going, though. I get that he treated Max poorly, though, but he never went that far. It almost made me want to feel sorry more for Max and the people rather than the Grinch himself. I get that he's supposed to be, what, a anti-protagonist, I think? But other than that, I don't really think that this Grinch would dare find this special enough, though. So, Grinch, I may like you, but I don't think I like you enough to hold a special place in my heart. Hey! But, yeah, let's move on to the next entry. So the next special, well, I say special, but it's more like a 22-minute episode, and it's from a show that I've covered once before, and I don't like going back to it. In this case, Adult Party Cartoon. Now, I've already done a video on Adult Party Cartoon, and like it or not, though, I think it could have been better. Mostly because the audio was jacked up since I had my old laptop at the time, and what's worse, I was just being one of those people that just wanted to try to get my anger out of it, though. Don't know why I wanted to do stuff like that, but beyond that, I don't know what else to say about the video in of itself, except you can check it out when this video's done. But aside from that, though, I know what you're thinking. Adult Party Cartoon is not disturbing, you're just being a coward. Well, maybe that's true if it wasn't for the fact that, say what you want about the original series, as disturbing and grossed out as it is, at least it had fucked up moments you could find memorable. But for some reason, one episode in particular that scared me from Adult Party Cartoon when I was a teenager after watching the said episode, even though I was being a nosy flamingo at the time. I'm still nosy if it wasn't obvious. That episode in particular was Ren Seeks Help. Admittedly, this was one of those episodes that I did see on Mr. Enters Animated Atrocities videos. Oh man, now that I go back to those, I feel old as shit. What the hell? Anyways, back to Ren Seeks Help, however, though. While I can't really show too many images off of this, though, not just because I can't show more than one image of each entry, but also because I don't think my computer can handle something this somewhat creepy. I don't know what scared me more, though, the fact that this had bad writing that gave me nightmares, or the fact that this was one of those episodes that screams, yeah, this is how you do not so good writing anyways, though. But what's the episode about? Well, the episode starts off with Stimpy crying for 3 minutes straight. Yeah, just have that bust in your eardrums. Yeah, Eric Bowser, just keep going with it. And as you can probably guess, though, Ren goes out to see a psychiatrist, and it's basically as lame as you get. Basically a backstory about how Ren became who he is, and there's no substance to it, though. Now, personally, I don't mind backstories here and there. I love seeing backstories. But the problem I see here is that this doesn't feel like a backstory. That just feels like Ren Stimpy is just trying to make an episode about why Ren acts the way he does, and they fail at it miserably. Here's the kicker, though. While I admit that this is really one of those cases where some people will say it's dark humor, or say it's supposed to be for shock humor, me to remind you, I've seen plenty of shows they did dark humor and shock humor way better than I could have ever dreamed of writing anyways, though. And yeah, I get what you're saying, though. This is supposed to be talking about your childhood nightmares, not writing school 101, Flamingo. But let me just say in preference for this year video, I didn't know what scared me the most out of this year special. I remember watching this as a teenager when I was just looking through all of my browsers to see what Ren Seeks Help was like, and, well, it's basically the rehash of Ren Needs Help, and you can pretty much guess what it was. Bad writing, bad jokes, and worst of all, bad pacing. And the worst part of this episode is that I felt like there was so much missed opportunity to make it look like what happened to Ren, why he has anger issues and stuff. But no, you're just gonna get mostly Ren torturing bugs, which, okay, I don't know if I'm being a sadist, but I don't really mind some bugs being squished or killed or whatever. And then there's this frog who, for some reason, just wants Ren to do, I'm not gonna say what it is, because it's basically someone trying to commit this themselves. And as you can probably guess by now, yeah, they don't really have that much to it though. Like Mr. N said before me, what's the point of this though? No, I'm not copying from Mr. Enter. I'm not that someone if you think I am. No, the problem I see here with this here special is that not only do they not do anything with it, but they also seem to think that this is supposed to get a laugh out of some people. Now, humor is subjective. I'm going to say this right here and now. I'll say this once again, though. Everybody has a different sense of humor. I mean, hell, I can say that not everyone's going to like dark humor or shock humor. I mean, let's be honest, though. Robot Chicken does a lot of those, and I think they pretty much succeeded, but I'm not here to talk about that show in particular. But here, not only did it not succeed, but it also felt to me that they were trying way too hard as it is to get a laugh out of it, though. Not even close to that, though. I will say that this is what I find interesting. Despite what some people might tell you, yeah, somehow this episode became a classic, and some people still will enjoy it to this day, which, again, I'm not here to take away anyone's opinions on something like this, but really? This is something you want to watch? I mean, granted, you must have a dark, sick sense of humor and everything judged by, but I can think of a ton of shows that do dark humor very well, like, say, early Rick and Morty and BoJack Horseman, but other than those two, I can't really say for the life of me what got people to like this episode. Beyond that, while it could be the best out of the other adult party cartoons, I'm not coming back to it anytime sooner. I guess what really scared me the most is how, at the end, what Ren does to Dr. Horse, which, yeah, Dr. Horse or Therapy Horse, I don't know what to call him, though, because this episode's just too migraining for my taste. And other than that, I don't want to waste anyone's time about how I felt about it. So, let's just move on before I feel like I'm gonna make someone explode. The next entry on this list, however, we finally get into shows that I find actually good. In this case, we're starting off with My Life as a Teenage Robot. I'm not so sure about you guys, but when I was a kid, I used to come home from school watching this show a lot whenever it was on. And to be honest, I remember talking to a friend of mine just to say that you can watch the show if you want to when it was on, though. Granted, this was before I never had television ever since, and then after that, but hey, it's still a show I admire to this day, though. Too bad Nickelodeon has screwed it over, but still. But I know what you're thinking. Flamingo, this was a lighthearted show. The least they did was intense moments. How can this show be dark? Well, you wouldn't know about it if it wasn't for Raggedy Android. Remember Raggedy Android? The skin that helped Jenny look more human? Yeah, that still kind of really made me wonder. That was a prequel to it, though, because I didn't know there was a prequel to it, though. Or maybe I did watch the episode, I just didn't remember it, though. That changes here, though. I'm not talking about the prequel of this episode. I'm talking about the other episode. They saved the creepiness for Raggedy Android for the second part that she came in. The second, and as much as I'm aware, final episode she ever appeared. Unless you see something like DeviantArt saying Return of, or say The Revenge of Raggedy Android or something, but let's get on to The Return of Raggedy Android. Now, the episode itself, though, I'm not gonna sugarcoat and say that it was always this dark, but I will sugarcoat it by saying what happens into it, though. So let's get into it. Basically, what you need to know about the episode is that Jenny wants to hang out with her crush Brad at work. Unfortunately, Brad's boss doesn't seem to like robots, so he has a no robots policy. Wow, poor Jenny. And as you can probably guess, though, Jenny goes running home to her mother so she can ask about if she can use the Raggedy Android skin, but starts to realize that her mother did a few upgrades about it. Or did she? The first part of the episode itself, though, starts off what you expect. Pretty lighthearted and some combination of still being kid-friendly. until the Raggedy android starts taking over her Jenny. Yeah, I know what you're thinking. She's a robot. What the hell? And yeah, you can pretty much guess what this is turning out to be, though. And yeah, it's as creepy as it can get, though. Now, when I first saw this episode, I forgot about watching this when I was a kid. But after watching it when I first saw Mr. Enter and the Hero of Tomorrow put this episode on their own lists, I come to realize that I figured out why I forgot about it, because I forgot this episode existed until those creepy memories came back to me. Now, normally I wouldn't go into detail of what I thought about this episode, but let me just tell you right now, the skin itself is pretty creepy, especially when the skin itself just says to Jenny by telling her, normal is good. I'm not normal myself, and I still find that pretty creepy. By the way, though, I don't really talk about behind the scenes stuff here and there, though, but allow me to tell you that this episode does have a bit of history behind it. Apparently, this episode was supposed to be inspired by the Venom symbiote, which I'm not so sure how a Venom symbiote can do so already, though. I'm not a hardcore Spider-Man fan, and I'm probably going to piss some Spider-Man fans off if I ask this question, since I don't really keep up with the said hero, but isn't the Venom symbiote supposed to be part of Eddie Brock after he tried to commit you-know-what, and basically go through by saying that Venom and Eddie were made for each other? Don't read too much into that. I'm pretty sure the fanfic writers already have that shipping in their head. Ew. I don't even want to read the implications if it wasn't obvious. But when I started watching this episode, though, while I get that was the intent, I don't think I've ever been this creeped out about the skin other than just that, though. Seriously, though, watching this episode again really scared me. And after watching it when I was 15 years old, when I first saw those two, I think I might want to skip this one again if I wanted to binge through the show. I don't really know. Yeah, it scares me to the point where I wish those nightmares could get away from me, though. Get the hell out of here, skin! And yeah, I'm not going to spoil too much about what happens in here, but later on in the episode, while the skin starts taking over, though, there are these they're motor monsters or something? I really don't know, though, what to call them, but other than that, Jenny does defeat them, but it's kind of creepy what the Raggedy Android does to Brad's boss. And yeah, I hope I didn't give you too many nightmares from that, because otherwise, yeah, let's get away from here before the skin comes and eats me alive. So let's go on to the next entry on this list, which is about a superhero show that I still love coming back to, though. Yeah, you thought I only loved magical girl shows? Whatever gave you that idea? Yeah, this is one case where I never really talked about superhero shows from either DC or Marvel, except for maybe a few occasions on my taste buds anyways, though. But one show in particular that I love going back to again and again would have to be Teen Titans. No, not Teen Titans Go, the original Teen Titans. I mean it. I loved this show a lot when I was growing up. Well, sort of. I only caught about 2 episodes when I first started watching this show with one of my older sisters, and that was it. But I did go back to it when I was 15, and when I binged through this show, I loved it. And I think that's where I started watching The Hero of Tomorrow with his countdown list for how much this show really got to me in a lot of ways, though. That being said, however, though, what episode really gets to me, and I'm pretty sure this is part of their own lists as well, that episode would have to be the episode Haunt. Despite that title of the episode, though, the episode in question really does live up to it, though, and I'm not going to deny that, though. But you might be asking yourself why, though. Well, let's go over it, shall we? Robin is still trying to find out what Slade's motivation is, but considering that Slade already got defeated in the Season 2 finale Aftershock, Robin starts to wonder what Slade is up to at this point, though, even though he should know that Slade was in hell at this continuity right now. And before you know it, though, the Titans get a signal about Cinderblock doing something, though. However, while fighting off Cinderblock, though, it's here where we have Robin getting separated from the Titans and starts seeing Slade everywhere he goes, though. Not sure how this all happened, though, because the Titans don't really believe him, though. It's here where we see that Slade is really into Robin's mind and starts seeing Slade everywhere he goes, right to the point where the Titans don't really believe him though. So much so that they tell him that there is no Slade, but Robin is not having it though, going more local more than ever before though as time goes on, and he starts losing it. Now, one thing about this episode in of itself though is that it's crazy how Robin go so far as to get Slade though. You see how badly he gets beaten up in the episode, despite the fact that no one else is there, and he gets every chance of his fiber being just to get to Slade, though. But what really sinks this episode in is probably how much I remember watching this as a teenager, though. When I was a kid, this episode didn't really stick with me as much as I thought it would have until I started rewatching it as a teenager. And let me tell you, if it's anything that the people have said it before, good God, it almost made me feel like I was going to be diagnosed with schizophrenia. After that, though, Robin is doing everything in his power just to get to Slade, and yet it's every time he tries to get to the Titans, though, the Titans still don't understand what is Robin seeing, though, and you can definitely tell why that is, though. If you haven't seen this episode, this might trigger your heart pumping more than you think, though, especially because of that, though. Imagine yourself in this scenario. Wouldn't you feel the same way if Robin was going after someone to enemy, especially when it comes to something like this? I get that Slade was an intimidating villain, but I have to say, Ron Perlman himself does a very great job voicing the character anyways, though. You might know Ron Perlman best from Hellboy or in my own introduction, though admittedly I think this could be my intro to Slade, would have to be when he played the two brothers from Tangled. And yeah, he gives it his all in here, like he does for the Hellboy franchise. And I'm all for it, though. There isn't much I can say about this episode without giving too many spoilers, but see it for yourself and don't tell me it wasn't haunting you after that. Seriously, watching this episode still gave me nightmares about how I feel like I was chasing after some other team's enemy. Not gonna say who it is for the sake of this video, but still. Anyways, let's move on to the next entry before I start scaring people. And now we move on to a show that, even if it is lighthearted, I can't get over how much I really love this show. The show I'm referring to is Blue's Clues. Now, immediately in your heads, I know some people are thinking, this show is not scary. It's supposed to be a kid-friendly and lighthearted. Why are you, crazy? Well, for one thing, us Flamingos can go more local at times, but we chose not to do it on camera for reasons. But it's pretty apparent as to why, though. See, Blue's Clues was my shit growing up, and I remember loving this show every time I came home from school and such. But anyways, there's bound to be an episode that did scare me as a kid. And when I say episode, I don't mean that's really what's caused me to not watch the show any more after that. But what really got me into Blue's Clues would have to be its Halloween episodes. Well, I say Halloween episodes, but since I don't watch the one with Josh, I'm watching the one that has something to do with Steve. Man, I really miss you, Steve. But yeah, apparently this is what got me invested into more Blue's Clues as time goes on, though. I would go with the episode where Steve dressed like a Halloween alien. In Halloween, he dressed like an alien, but that doesn't really scare me. It more fascinates me than I thought it would have. No, the episode in question that I'm going with in this case would have to be, What is Blue Afraid? This episode in question really did scare me in a lot of ways, and I'm not so sure how to describe it, but I'll try the best I can. See, what you need to know about this episode is basically Blue is afraid of something, and it's us, the audience, who have to help Steve out and gather the clues about what Blue is so scared of, though. Now, on the surface, this episode doesn't seem all that bad now, but let me tell you, when I watched this episode as a kid, I got scared the shit out of myself whenever this episode came out, though. Right to the point where I had to go ducking into a basement just to see if I can get over my fear in there. I'm not so sure how that would work, though, now that I look back at it as an adult, but continue. Anyways, yeah, the episode itself really did scare me, though. Like, maybe this is just me talking. I'm not so sure what scared me more. The fact that this really gave me a lot more suspense to work with to see what Blue was afraid of, or this was where my first experiences to owls were, though. I'm not kidding you when I say every time I watch something with owls, I immediately get scared. This wasn't the first show that got me scared of owls. I think the other show would have to be something like, say, from Stanley, if you remember that show from Playhouse Disney before Disney Junior became its own friend thing. Ooh, what the hell is I talking about? But yeah, that's really what I have to say, though. Now, one thing's for sure when I first saw this episode is really how creepy the music was. You know how whenever Steve draws his clues, there's usually music to show what clues he's gathering, and they put the music together there and such, though? I'm not so sure if they do that in the Blue's Clues and You series, but I know they did that in when Steve was around. And let me tell you, every time that music came around, I was really scared myself, though. But the one sound that did scare me is the sound that an owl makes. The whoo, whoo sound. Seriously, I could not tell you how much that scared the hell out of me. And what's worse, I started watching this in the dark when my Nana recorded this for me on VHS. I'm not kidding, I was really that scared. But do you know what's the scariest part? This is probably where I started realizing that this may be where I started increasing sleep insomnia. I'm not joking when I tell you that this episode scared me so much to the point where I couldn't sleep for about a week or two at night. Yeah, I had the nightlight on to help me out, though, but for God's sake, that didn't even help me out, and people say that nightlights are supposed to help go out anyways. Granted, I was with my two older sisters when we were still sleeping in the same room together before I slept in the same room with my younger sister, but still, I can't tell you how much that really scared me. But regardless, I wouldn't watch this episode at night for myself, even to this day, but hey, it's still a nice episode to watch. I still love Blue's Clues, even if this episode still scares me in a lot of ways. But with that said, let's go before the owls start to eat this flamingo alive. So the next episode in question, I might as well talk about another superhero show that's still stuck with me to this day. In this case, I'm referring to is the Powerpuff Girls. Now, the Powerpuff Girls, the 1998 classic series specifically, is one that I grew up with a lot. In fact, I think this may have been my first ever animated show to ever watch on not just Cartoon Network, but in any show out there, period, for my own life expanse. I love the Powerpuff Girls that much. I used to watch the shows with my sisters, we used to play a lot of these games, we used to get some of the merchandise, and the list goes on. But one thing's for sure, the Powerpuff Girls, like Teen Titans, even though this came out before Teen Titans, was not afraid to go dark despite being all cutesy and whatnot. Seriously, have you seen this show before? Of course not. I'm just talking about my ass. Oh man, I'm getting old. But yeah, apparently this show was not afraid to go dark though. So that episode in question that I started getting scared by was, well, originally I wanted to put Cootie Crest on here because this was an episode where the girls were scared of a boy giving cooties. I thought girls had cooties. Sorry, ladies, you know it's kind of true what we get through. But yeah, this was not what I was referring to instead. Instead of that, I decided to go with a different episode. But which one? In this case, Speed. No, I'm not referring to the one from Michael Jackson. I mean really from the Powerpuff Girls. I get the reference behind it though. But instead though, Speed Demon itself is one that not only did it scare me when I started watching the show again as a 12-year-old as well as an adult, but it's also its message. The episode goes like this. It's time for a break from Pokey Oaks Kindergarten, and the girls all together race home to see who can fly the fastest. In fact, they fly so fast that they started going faster than the speed of light, right until they go into a very eerie, dreary, and very red-like version of Townsville, but this time it's taking place in Heck. Yeah, I think you already know what that means in kid form. And yeah, as you can probably guess, though, so who's taking care of this here, the greater dimension, would have to be from none other than him himself. Now, of all the Powerpuff Girls villains I could name at the top of my head, him was always, he's the one I've always gravitated on the most. I don't know what it is with me enjoying him a lot, though, but I think it has to do with Tom Kane's delivery, the same guy who voiced the professor in the show, if anyone's curious. And I have to admit, though, he does very well with this episode as well, though. A lot of the episodes that focus around him, I immediately gravitate on, though. Yeah, some episodes don't really have him doing all dark stuff, like say, hey, what's that episode called? Him Riddle Diddle? Him Diddle Riddle? Yeah, my tongue is in a blender again. Oh, what's wrong with me? Anyways, yeah, this episode itself is pretty dark, well, things considered, though. And when him takes over, especially when he goes into his other form, which, okay, dude, what the hell? If you can do that form in this episode, why couldn't you do that more often? That would be so badass. Unless it scared the kids, but that form didn't scare me. Like I said, what's really scared me the most about this episode was how the message conveyed it to listen itself, though. Despite the girls trying to figure out what happened to Townsville, though, a lot of these here characters went so far out of their way to do so much that they couldn't even tell, though. Like Miss Keen just waving to the girls after they left, and she's still waving right in front of Pokio's kindergarten. And no, and then there was also the professor who can't figure out what the formula is to the girls, and then Miss Ballum going so far as to come into corpse, though, when something awful to happen to the mayor. Don't you think that mean that he died or something? He was pretty old, though. And yeah, as you can imagine, the townspeople say it's the girls' fault for not being there. Oh yeah, it's their fault. It's their fault. It's their fault. Okay, I get that the message itself never to neglect responsibilities, but what the hell? Pun unattended. But what am I supposed to get out of that? I get that the girls are the only super heroines in this entire town, but even so, though, would you really react that way if the police or even firefighters needed sometimes off, though? You mean to tell me they can't take breaks here and there? Despite that, however, though, the message itself is pretty simple, though. Never neglect your responsibilities. And I have to admit, they really did it in a very horrifying way to show it, though. But in spite of all of that, I really do find this episode fascinating. I wouldn't call it perfect, but I would call it memorable for all the scary reasons. Seriously, watching this episode still gives me nightmares like I'm going to hell. Wonder what that sounds like. But yeah, this is definitely a case where I have to admit, though, I still enjoy the hell out of, though. I have to stop saying hell, don't I? But without further ado, let's move on to the next entry before I go into... Yeah, no, let's just go into the next entry. The next entry on this list is honestly from a show that I personally didn't watch a lot of, but I did watch it a bit when it was on Nicktoons when it was rerunning. That show being Hey Arnold. Now, Hey Arnold is a show that, while I admit 1,000 times before that I am not a 90s kid, seriously, I was born in 1999, I call myself a 2000 kid for a reason. Anyways, while I really didn't grow up with this show a lot, I've only seen a few episodes, and while I did watch this show for myself, as an adult, I gotta say, it's actually a pretty great show. It's no wonder why Nickelodeon remembered this show fondly, even the 90s kids. But despite the fact that Hey Arnold itself was a slice-of-life show that was made for kids in mind, they weren't afraid to go through the supernatural route. And I mean it. But which episode am I going with this time? Haunted Train? Nah, that one's overrated, but I still love it. Let's see, what else is there? That one part in Part-Time Friends? Nah, I'm not gonna go with that one. What else is there? Oh, maybe I can go with Ghost Bride or The Headless Cavity. No, I'm not going to go with those, though, because Gem Reviews himself talked about those. Speaking of which, whatever happened to Gem Reviews? Anyways, no, the episode in question I'm going with this time would have to be the episode Four-Eyed Jack. Now, admittedly, I think this may be why I didn't watch Hey Arnold a lot as a kid when it was on Nicktoons Network, but either way, I'm still a little scared of this episode. Even as an adult, I'm still scared if it wasn't obvious, though. But the episode in question goes like this. There was a ghost of a former boarding house member known as Four-Eyed Jack, who was believed to be a strange occurrence, though. However, a lot of people expect to believe that he got killed off from some kind of pressure cooker, until then when Arnold and Gerald found an old pair of glasses that belonged to him. They tried to figure out what could have been, though, while Gerald, being a skeptic as he is, yeah, don't blame him, and as though they're trying to uncover the mystery of Four-Eyed Jack. But when it comes right down to it, this episode did creep me out. Not just in terms of its writing. The writing itself, while great, I think it has to do with Four-Eyed Jack himself, though. A lot of kids said that Hey Arnold spooked them a bit when it comes to the most eerie episodes, even if they weren't really Halloween episodes, despite that there's already been a Halloween episode, but I didn't really find that one scary. I found it more fascinating than I could have, though. But what really got to me was Four-Eyed Jack himself. You see this ghost here? Or phantom? Yeah, I'm just gonna say what it is, though. I have to say, hey, though, when I first saw this for myself as an adult, though, I figured out, though, this is probably where I started watching a bit of Hey Arnold, and I stopped watching entirely, though. I know Hey Arnold's not necessarily a horror show, but let me tell you, whenever they do something horror-related or something that's supernatural-related, yeah, it's more supernatural than it is horror, but I'm just gonna come out and say this. This ghost right here scared the absolute fuck out of me. I'm not kidding you when I say that. So this episode really did scare me, and I only watched it around daytime. I think it was around a thunderstorm time now I think about it, when I was in first grade. But needless to say, when I first saw this ghost, and even if he had just covered up Gerald just put him into bed and everything, though, yeah, after he goes, boo, after he whooshes away, I'm right there with Gerald. I'd be screaming at the top of my lungs after that, though. Maybe it's just me, but I'm starting to realize that Hey Arnold, though, yeah, maybe one of those shows that doesn't really do the, oh, maybe it was all a ghost, or maybe something else ambiguous. I mean, I'm all for having ambiguity, but this is one of those cases where they have one of those few shows saying it was true all along, but only for very few characters to see, though. Seriously, you name a show at the top of your head where things started going batshit insane and still make it believable enough to know it is. But after all of those episodes that scared the hell out of me as a kid, though, what could possibly make it to the final entry on this list? Well, now you may have noticed that I've only talked about entries on this list that could have been horror-related shows. But honestly, I decided to go with one more entry before we close things off here for now. In this case, we might as well talk about a show that is horror-related. You know it, I know it, everybody knows it, it's Courage the Cowardly Dog. Now as a kid, this show somehow didn't frighten me as much as I thought it would have, though, but for different reasons, though. Maybe it's because I was dead inside of me that I didn't really find this show scary, or maybe there wasn't something about it that didn't really scare me a whole lot that I thought it would have, but needless to say, the show itself, though, really did get to me more than I thought it would have, though. Say what you want about to this year's show being scary. It was memorable for a lot of ways, though. Even in their lighthearted moments, they're still being memorable. Remember Remembrance of Courage? But what episode in particular in this year's show should I put on this list? I'm gonna go with The Unpredictable. Yeah. I mean, sure. I know I could have put something on here like, say, Perfect being a very memorable episode to put on this list, but that's not the episode I'm going with. Nor am I going with King Ramesses' Curse. No, instead I'm going with the episode that frightened me, and to this day, a lot of people still go through. In this case, The Mask. Not to be confused with the movie The Mask, but you get what I'm saying, though. Now, this episode did haunt me, and even to this day it still does so. But while it still gave me nightmares as a kid, I think it gave me nightmares in ways that I'm supposed to learn something from this. So in this case, let's talk about it. The episode goes like this. A very mysterious woman comes in the middle of nowhere to be with comes to the Bags farm, though. At first glance, though, she seemed kind of sweet and stuff like that, but not until she starts beginning attacking and beating the living shit out of Courage just because he's a dog. However, one night when Courage starts seeing this here mouse toy, though, this woman turns out to be Kitty, and Courage goes south to find her best friend, Bunny, as you can tell, though, this evil dog who happens to go so far is the reason why Kitty and Bunny hate dogs, though, has to deal with one character, the most despicable, vile character that even scares me to this day, Mad Dog. Now, that description alone, I already know what you're thinking. A lot of the other entries on this list, while they were scary, why is Mad Dog on here? He's not really supposed to be someone that kills, or something that's coming from the ghosts of supernatural anywhere out there. What are you, crazy? Well, I chose this episode because Mad Dog is one of those characters that we, as an audience, can at least interpret that this is one of those cases where Mad Dog is really one of those people that we all know what we're going through. Abuse. Now, unlike a certain other person I'm not going to mention, I don't know if I can call them a person after that. I'm just going to say right here and now, this episode was memorable for me in all the scary ways. And I think it's a safe bet that it really does stick with me more than I thought it would have. Let's stick this out of the way while we still can, though. Despite this episode doing pretty well for itself, though, let me give you an alternative of what I mean by that, though. Remember the episode from Family Guy called Screams of Silence, the story of Brenda Q? Yeah, that episode itself tries to tackle abuse and abusive relationships. However, that episode failed because it was just more focused on comedy than it is with being serious. Take this with a grain of salt, though. I don't mind having jokes here and there, but that episode itself was played in a way that you don't even think they're going to take it seriously as time goes on, though. And, well, I'm not going to lie, though, this episode really stuck with me. More ways than you may think. A lot of us go through abuse, and the sad thing is, it still happens to this day. People will take advantage of you. And not just that, though, they'll take advantage of your psyche to mess with you and so much and other stuff. People don't like it when others take advantage of someone that they're close to. Worse yet, they'll just judge them because, well, that's probably how they all are. I'm someone with trust issues, and you can definitely tell I say this to a lot of my friends, though. And when it comes right down to it, this episode spoke to me in a way that I felt like this episode was trying to get to me at times. And I should know. Sometimes it feels like every time I watch this episode, I'm just here left wondering why are they doing this. Mad Dog may be an intimidating villain, but let me tell you, if this episode was anything to judge by, then you can definitely tell that this was the case where I could definitely assure you no one in their mind would ever say to you that this was the way of saying things, that maybe there is something here we're just trying to get at. Now I realize that not everyone is going to see what abuse is like, though, but most people, especially these days, can't let go of the fact they've been abused. This isn't some kind of wound that you can just put a band-aid over and then it'll eventually get better after a week or two. No, I mean, like, this is one case where nobody knows how to overcome something like this. I went through a lot of SA in my life, and honestly, it's hard not to say that what's going through in this episode really does speak in it, though. Now, I realize that this is not really SA material. They wouldn't do that in a kid's show, but a lot of abuse, it doesn't matter what kind of abuse there is still gonna hurt you. Even if it doesn't hurt you, like, say, physically punching you or slapping you in the face, it still hurts you in your own way. Your scars are still there. You're still wondering, when is it ever going to stop? Even when you go to sleep at night, you're probably asking yourself, though, is everything going to be all right by the next day? I've been going through this a lot, and on that technical side, I can definitely assure you, this episode spoke to me on so many levels. Kitty and Bunny, despite that, however, may be the first time we ever see something from a Cartoon Network show canonically confirm that they're a sapphic couple. And that's pretty damn cool, though. They don't outright say it, though, but you can definitely say that this show really spoke to it by just saying a show don't tell thing. Now, Mad Dog may be one of those people that say, oh, it's supposed to be that all men are abusive, but abusive women do exist too. And let's be honest, though, not every man and women are the same thing. Regardless of what you may think of men and women, there's just one thing that a lot of victims go through. We go through a lot of hurt in our lives. And it's our chance to try our best to try to do whatever it can, though. Despite what some people might say, though, I still feel like this episode of itself really spoke to me on so many levels. And while I'm on the side point, though, while I will admit this episode is hard to watch, though, make no mistake, it is kind of hard to watch, though, especially when you first see it, though, I still feel like this episode spoke to me on so many levels, more than you may think. And don't be afraid to find people who will stick behind you, though. Whether you go through a lot or whether you're still trying to find yourself by the end of the day, there's never been a chance where you can't find people and for hopes that they'll always stick by you. So, say what you want about the other entries, this one was the most relatable to me, and it gave me nightmares in a way that I can definitely interpret. It really stuck with me in better ways than I thought it would have, though. Sure, abuse is not something we want to go through, but I personally feel like it's still stuck with me to the point where, despite those nightmares coming back to haunt me, I often remind myself that there are still going to be people out there by my side who will always be with me, no matter what happens, though. And the same goes for you, too. I really hope you guys don't mind me saying that, though. I may not be a psychiatrist or a therapist about what goes on in people's minds and everything like that, but by the end of the day, we're still human. Yes, even in me, despite my weird antics. But even with that said, however, though, I really hope this list gave off the Halloween vibe for it, though. And this won't be the only Halloween treat on this list I'll have for my list. This may not have been the hardest list, though, but let me tell you, recording this was not easy. I hope to get the next list out soon enough so it won't take as long as this one, but hopefully when I talk about the next treat on this list, I'll finally get to talk about another Clamp series. But until then, thank you all so much for watching. I'll see you all next time, and as always, stay Flamingo-tastic. See you.